Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the CCIR Student Spotlight, where we interview our past students to learn about their research and their experience in our programs. My name is Benny, and I'm the Director of Youth Outreach, and I'm incredibly excited to welcome on the episode today with Bianca. Bianca is a current junior at Dubai College who participated in CCIR's one-on-one research mentorship this summer. In her research, she focused on the topic of neuroscience. Under the mentorship of Dr. Guja from the University of Cambridge, she ultimately produced a research paper titled Alzheimer's Disease, What Do We Know About It and How Can We Tackle It? Which I am incredibly excited to learn about it today. So without further ado, please welcome Bianca.
Hi,
welcome, Bianca. Could you please introduce about yourself briefly to the audience, please?
Yeah, so my name is Bianca and I live in Dubai and I'm in year 12 at Dubai College. So I'm currently doing my A-levels because it's a British school. And so I've always had like an affinity for the sciences and not just the research aspect, but also like the clinical side as an aspiring med. While like ideally my goal is to study medicine, I also find that scientific research being so broad and like ever growing is something that is really important even within the job of a physician. So I was really keen on undertaking this project and like the one-on-one mentorship because I thought it would be a really great opportunity to get a thorough insight into a specific area of science that really interested me and simultaneously improve like my academic writing. So I did the one-on-one mentorship program with Dr. Gonja Bayraktar, who's a neuroscientist at Cambridge University. And I felt like my scientific interests really aligned with her field of research. So I thought it was a great fit. And her guidance was also extremely helpful in the whole writing and planning process. And so the paper that I did, like you mentioned, was about Alzheimer's disease and the pathogenesis of it and current methods of treatment.
Thank you. So could you, like, since you kind of introduced your research paper to us, could you kind of go deep down, kind of what was the project about, your title, and the abstract about your paper?
Yeah, so my title was Alzheimer's Disease, What Do We Know About It and How Can We Tackle It? So it was a literature review as this one-on-one mentorship was kind of during the thick of the pandemic. I wasn't really able to carry out my own research, which would have been nice, but this literature review was still quite interesting to carry out. So essentially what I did is research a lot about this area and then kind of collate it into my own review and put everything into one. And so my main focus of this review was the pathogenesis debate. So within Alzheimer's disease, there's a really prevalent debate about what truly causes it and about the pathogenesis with scientists. So there's two main leading hypotheses, which one being the amyloid hypothesis and one being the tau hypothesis. So essentially to break this down, these are both so tau is a protein and it can form tangles within cells, which can lead to Alzheimer's disease. And beta amyloid is also a protein peptide, which causes plaques outside of cells, usually in the hippocampus of the brain, so extracellularly. And there's a fierce debate between scientists about which one is more closely linked with the pathogenesis of Alzheimer's. And so that's what I tried to focus on and evaluate throughout my review. And while I wanted to keep it broad as well, so I discussed treatment opportunities, and this also linked towards the hypotheses as treatment opportunities and clinical trials kind of revolved around these hypotheses. So people who were more focused on the amyloid hypothesis would try and find drugs which focused on removing amyloid plaques, and scientists focused on the tau hypothesis would focus on helping remove tangles or dissolve them, kind of.
Yeah, it seems like you kind of focus a lot of specific areas of interest and try to connect with a broader topic, right? Yeah. So I want you to kind of pick two main concepts, like super important concept in your research paper. And could you please kind of give us a simple explanation about your concept, about your main ideas that you had in your literature review papers, like two main concepts?
So I'd say one main concept would be the hypotheses. So to give more detail, but in a simple manner, I would say that with the tau hypothesis, it forms neurofibrillary tangles, which is a hallmark characteristic in Alzheimer's disease. So how this happens is that these tau proteins have threads that twist and can tangle in cells in the brain tissue. And what happens is that in a healthy individual, something called a structure called microtubules support neurons and are part of the transport network. And this protein tau attaches to phosphate molecules and helps stabilize the microtubules. In an Alzheimer's patient, there's more phosphate molecules than needed, and this essentially hyperphosphorylates the tau, which can then lead to these tangles. And that collapses this whole network, this whole transport network, and then essentially like degenerates, causing neurodegeneration, which Alzheimer's disease is a and the other hypothesis, amyloid hypothesis, focuses on like clumps of beta amyloid, which is a protein peptide, and these form in the area surrounding the neurons and brain cells. So it's called extracellular deposits. But within this debate, some people lean toward for example, some people who lean towards the tau hypothesis say things like amyloid plaques are still present in healthy individuals who don't have Alzheimer's disease but are simply just aging normally, whereas neurofibrillary tangles are only present in people experiencing neurodegeneration. But then on the other hand, when you look at arguments focusing on the amyloid hypothesis, you see that the most recent drug approved by the FDA for treating Alzheimer's disease, which is one thing that I discussed in my paper, was aducanumab, which focuses on removing amyloid plaques. And since it's been FDA approved and been in use since this year, 2021, it has clearly exemplified how the amyloid hypothesis has some accuracy to it in the pathogenesis of Alzheimer's.
So you mentioned, oh, I'm sorry,
yeah.
I'm sorry. Continue, please.
No, don't worry. And then on another concept that I kind of discussed was animal models, so specifically mice models. And so in clinical trials, something called transgenic mice models are used, which is where a gene intervention is put into this mouse, the genome of the mouse, to test a certain drug. But yeah.
Yeah, it is really interesting that you kind of mentioned the FDA's approval and the certain measure on the year 2021, which is very recent. So like, do you follow these news? Like, how do you catch up with this current events, and like, what's the kind of interest that you kind of blend into your life pattern in those areas?
So neuroscience itself has always really fascinated me, which is kind of why I wanted to do a research project within this field. I find it to be very multifaceted, as when you think of it, there's cognitive neuroscience and molecular neuroscience. So it encompasses a lot of things like biology, molecular biology, and then also psychology and behavioral sciences, which also interests me. And so when I do scientific reading and research, it always tends to lead me towards neuroscience because that's probably my favorite area to look into. And so since this was a literature review, I did have to do a lot of reading to write this paper. And I found I learned a lot from that. It also really demonstrated how, again, like I said, ever-growing science is, and how scientists are constantly working and creating new scientific developments. Like one paper that was particularly interesting when I was doing this review was the COVID-19 implications on Alzheimer's disease, which is also something I talked about in the paper, because it kind of showed how this disease, which has been researched for so long, relates to modern pressing issues like the pandemic. And so I discussed that a lot in my review towards the end to link it to modern issues.
Mm. So when you're kind of gathering your information and kind of making your thesis, making your point, making your analysis and your literature reviews, what are some interesting aspects of the practical part or relation to the bigger picture?
So you need to
Should I rephrase? Was that
yeah,
unclear?
I think so.
What we are asking is kind of how did you kind of collect your information? And you have like a series of information, right? You have a lot of data, you have a lot of reading to do. So how did you collect those information together to create a bigger picture, a bigger thesis that you're kind of aiming
Okay.
for your paper?
Yeah, so under Dr. Gonda's guidance, we formed like a structure for the review to make sure that everything linked and it was a comprehensive overview of Alzheimer's disease and its journey. So I started off talking about the history of Alzheimer's disease and how it was discovered, and then I moved on talking about because this linked to how hence the different hypotheses. This led me into discussing that debate, and because these hypotheses then allowed treatment opportunities to arise, then I started talking about treatment, and because treatment opportunities to test drugs, you need to do clinical trials, which involve animal models. Then I talked about animal models. So I kind of made sure everything flowed so that I got like a comprehensive outline of the disease and neurodegeneration while making sure nothing went out of flow.
Mm. So when you're specifically selecting this course with your professor, were you kind of aiming for that? May I ask why you picked this course specifically out of like a lot of neuroscience programs that we offer?
So I think it was something, it falls within molecular neuroscience, which is something that I haven't got much experience with in researching. So I have like had some experience with academic writing, but one that I did like mainly myself for school. It was a project called like an IPQ, and so I did it when I was doing my GCSEs last year because I'm in a British school, and that was honestly more psychology based, but within that, because I'm really interested in neuroscience, I tried to relate it to cognitive neuroscience and neurobiology. So that was my question was, is there such a thing as a good psychopath? So I talked about social factors, but then also like biological factors in neuroscience. But since that was all cognitive, I also find molecular neuroscience really interesting, like neurodegeneration and neurodegenerative diseases. So I thought that that would definitely be something that I want to look into next.
Interesting. So while during your courses, do you have some lecture experiences or favorite lecture memories that you have with your professor specifically?
Yeah, so our first meeting was very lecture based, and after that it became more discussion, and so in our first meeting, she kind of gave me like a good outline to the disease and this debate that I just mentioned between the hypotheses and why it's important. And because she works in the UKDRI, the UK Dementia Research Institute. So this is also her main field of research. And so that was the only kind of lecture-based meeting that we had. After that, it was very discussion-based, and I would tell her what I'd been reading, and I'd kind of summarize what I'd got from the papers that I'd read, and then she told me how I could apply it to my paper and how I could make things flow without everything being scrambled and how to structure things. So yeah.
So mainly it was the special thing about the course was it was kind of discussion based, and you were kind of applying a lot with your applications, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think that's something that I really enjoyed about the one-on-one mentorship is because I could ask so many questions and it wasn't restricting because I didn't have to like filter myself to wait for her to like talk, because it was like a one-on-one conversation. I could ask any questions that I had.
Yeah, absolutely. Now this is actually a really smooth transition to ask. You're in high school and are you in IB school or A-level school?
A-level.
A-level school. I don't know how that works, but how was this kind of an experience? Was this course different from your high school courses?
Yeah, so In A levels, the classes are smaller than they were in GCSEs like last year, but still, it's nothing compared to one-on-one, obviously mentorship. Because let's say in my biology class, there's like 15 people. It's not like I really get a chance to constantly be asking questions and kind of extend super curricularly outside of the syllabus and to just kind of fulfill like what I want to learn and what what interests me, because there are more people in the class who just want to get like what's needed out of the way. And so I really like this program because I got to do something that interested me within biology and science, and also just keep asking as many questions that I wanted to like fulfill my curiosity.
So now I think you know this, but like you were kind of offered with university level courses, and what kind of sense did you get after taking some university level courses with professors, and like did you kind of see some difference with high school courses? Did it help you to kind of plan ahead with the college life? May I ask that, please?
Yeah, of course. It was really self-motivated and self-driven as well. Like, and also like under the guidance of Dr. Gonja, she was like her guidance was really useful when it came to planning my paper and structuring it. But it gave me more of an insight into what uni life is going to be like. And obviously, as someone who wants to study medicine, research is also a heavy aspect on that, and is also something I'd want to continue in a like even as a healthcare professional. Like I wouldn't just want to be clinically focused. So I think that this was a really good way to start and get an understanding. So once I'm like get to that point in my education, I will kind of know what to expect and already have a good idea of academic writing. So
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like when we take high school courses, it is mainly for sometimes beginners, intermediate, advanced people, if you're taking AP courses or IB courses. But generally, you don't get a lot of chances to deep learn into the specific courses that you really want to explore, right? And some of the consequences is there are some challenges too, right? Absolutely. So my next question is, were there any some challenging part, but you find it rewarding by the end of your program experiences?
I think that the topic that I chose was really hard to understand at first, and the concept was quite hard to grasp, which is why even when you told me to kind of break down like the two main concepts, I found that a bit difficult to simplify everything because it took me so long to understand completely. And I can't even say still that I would obviously like I don't understand as much as a neuroscientist would, but to even get the knowledge that I do have right now took a while. And reading a lot of papers and journal articles isn't as easy as just reading like a fiction novel. It's like really quite hard to grasp, and it takes a while. It'll be a page and will feel like 10. So I think that was the most difficult part of it, is just trying to break down the concepts for myself so that I could understand it and then build it to a higher level of science. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and like I love how you mentioned it is a difficult course to kind of get a sense of what are we doing here. Like I absolutely understand, because as I said before, I'm not a STEM major. So, but for the STEM people who might be apprehensive in taking the same courses as you, what would you share with those people who are apprehensive in taking similar courses with neuroscience STEM courses, who are kind of hesitating to accept more challenges?
I would say that no matter how challenging something might seem, if it's something that you're truly passionate about, that it kind of overpowers the challenges and the difficulty, and it doesn't feel like a chore, but more like something that you do because it genuinely interests you and you enjoy it. So I would say that that's to pick a topic which you actually find fascinating, and that you wouldn't see it as a task like homework or something to do, and more something that you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. learning because you're interested and motivating doing so versus learning because of grades or because of outcomes is really different. I really appreciate how you phrase that. Learning, like these programs are really for people who are really motivated to learn more, explore more, and expand their research interest. And I really love that, Bianca, you explore that research interest by taking these challenging courses with you. Before we close up this interview, are there any other parts that you want to mention that I kind of missed throughout our interview today?
No, I think that all that I would mention is that I really enjoyed doing this project, and I think that research into any area that you're personally interested in is really valuable experience, and I would encourage anyone who has a niche interest that they find that they want to get a better insight into, like I would encourage them to do something like this as well.
Absolutely. Beautifully done, Bianca. Congratulations on your nomination for your Student Spotlight series again. And ladies and gentlemen, that was Bianca. Please give her warm greetings when these posts are up in our social media channels, YouTube channels. Thank you so much, Bianca.